welcome to Cheap Card Gamer. Card Gamers, one of the things I want to do on this show is review some maybe older, more obscure card games out there. And some of what is out there is in the form of a bunch of different older digital games, perhaps games that were released on Game Boy Advance, things like that that have been around for a while. So I wanted to do an episode about my stance on emulation. Sometimes these games are hard to find, and so one avenue that people utilize to play older games is emulation. And I'm going to tell you about my stances on emulation as sort of an introduction to that. I do a lot of emulation gaming, and I'll tell you about some of the devices I use and why I use that. I know some people take issue with it, and there are questions concerning legality of emulation. I'm going to tell you my stances about it on this episode. All right, guys, thanks for joining us. I'm going to get right to the point on this, why I think emulation should be legal. Let me clarify what that is. So first of all, when you're emulating games, what you're doing is you're downloading ROMs. If you're not familiar with this, you're downloading files. Basically, people have saved files of old, let's say it's a Game Boy game, for example, original Game Boy. And so you're downloading a file that is essentially the game to your computer or wherever it is you're downloading it. And then you have another program, which is called an emulator, that will allow you to upload that file and play that game. And now, of course, all of this is free. You download this on the internet and it's free. And you say, well, wait a minute, isn't that illegal? Technically, yes. Although I say technically, there's a lot of gray areas. Some people will point to things like fair use law for the purposes of, for just a lot of different reasons. People will point to different things. Some people will say, well, it's legal for you to have a backup of things that you own. But then the question comes up, what if I don't actually own the intellectual property that I'm downloading? I'm going to give you my stance on why I think emulating games should be legal. And I want to clarify. I believe that games over 15 years old should be able to be downloaded legally. I don't think that you should go out and be able to play a PS4 game and download it for free. That would be stealing, and I don't think that's right. You said, well, what's the difference between games 15 years old? So we'll say 2005, for example. If you think about it, a video game console life cycle is usually around 7 to 8 years. So in the span of 15 years, you're usually been through 2 console life cycles. So for example, Nintendo DS release date, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe the Nintendo DS released on 2004, the original Nintendo DS. So if we're going back to 2004, mostly would have been Game Boy Advance. That would be 15, 16 years ago, Game Boy Advance. Man, doesn't seem like that long ago, right? So no, but it's been that long. So here's the problem with this. Why I think you should be able to play games from that. There's a few reasons why I think you should be able to play games that are that old. That's what we're talking about is, from today's date that I'm putting this episode out there would be, 15 years ago, would be 2005. So like basically GBA and before that. The first reason I think emulation should be legal is this. The publisher and and if you want to call the individuals who created the game are not making any money anymore from the sale of those games. Those games, whatever money that the publisher and those companies made, that whoever created the game, the makers of the game, whatever money they made on that was when it was sold initially to the retailer, from the developer, publisher, whatever, to the retailers, Walmart, Circuit City, whoever. You remember Circuit City? Man, that was back in the day. Wherever they're selling it to, that's where they're making the money. If Walmart calls and says, we're going to order, 200,000 copies of this or whatever, this is a big deal game, then the publisher's making money on that sale. When I go to Walmart and buy a copy of the game, they're not making money on that. And same thing, if I buy it from somebody on eBay who already had purchased it, they're not making money on that either. So there's no loss from the makers of the game standpoint on buying old games. Think for instance, here's an example. If I walked into Walmart today and found let's just say this has never happened a million years, but you walk in and find an original copy of Super Mario Brothers 3 for the NES. It's still in the box. It's covered in dust. It was under the shelf for, you know, 25 years or whatever. And you actually found it. It still has the barcode on it. It's new in the package. You say, oh man, I wonder if I could buy this. You take it to the register and they ring it up and they say, well, man, I don't know. It doesn't have a price. You know, what about $10? You want to pay $10 for this? And so they ring you up in the register and you walk on your merry way. But man, I can't believe I got that. Nintendo doesn't get any money from that. Even you buy it new in the package, Nintendo doesn't get anything from that. Miyamoto or whoever it is that made the game, they get nothing from that. All of their money has already been made by the fact that that game is for sale in the retail store. So first reason I think emulation should be legal for games over 15 years old is there's no more money to be made from the publisher, assuming they haven't re-released the game in a digital shop. There's no money for them to be made. Second reason I think the hardware needed to play older games is often not made to last that long. And I'll give you an example in my own personal experience is my Game Boy Micro, speaking about Game Boy Advance. I have a Game Boy Micro. It's really cool. I love it. However, the battery, it's a rechargeable battery, has started to not last very long. As a matter of fact, even on a full charge, my Game Boy Micro battery is about to die. It'll give me the low battery signal. That is a problem when if I want to play Pokemon, for example, on there, I want to sit down for more than 10 minutes to play. If I want to play for an hour or whatever, the battery will not last for me to play the game. I literally can't play the game the way I want to, because of the hardware limitations. Now, you might hear that and say, well, you know, you could go on Amazon and buy a battery to replace that one. So now here's the problem there. I've got to buy a third-party battery, because I can't buy something direct from Nintendo for a 15-year-old hardware. I've got to unscrew the back of I got to work on my actual hardware to replace that battery. And it's a pain in the butt. I looked this up on Amazon and found battery that I could buy. It was like $20. And I said, man, I've got to pay $20 just to pay this. And this was made by Nintendo to be this way for a lifespan of this system. And the system itself has outlived the lifespan that it was designed for. So in one way, kudos to the Nintendo for doing that, for making something that lasted that long. But in the other way, if I'm trying to play older games, man, I shouldn't have to be replacing hardware. And man, good luck buying an NES, by the way. If we're talking about NES games, good luck buying an American NES first party made by Nintendo that is going to play games without fail, without some sort of hardware failure somewhere along the way. It's just, you're just going to have hard pressed to find something like that. Yeah, can you buy a third party system? But you're kind of circumventing the system once again. But anyway, that's the second reason. Hardware needed to play the games doesn't last that long. The third reason is this. Sometimes the software itself either doesn't work, is very expensive, or altogether impossible to get your hands on. If we're talking about old Game Boy games, for example, and especially with RPGs, usually they'll have a internal battery sometimes to save the game. And those batteries don't last long. That's why if you're buying on eBay, you'll see people say tested, battery is working or something like that. It's because they're talking about that internal battery. I have had some older games where the battery stops working. Maybe that's happened to you and you can't save anymore. You can't save your game. So you literally can't play the game if that's the case. Some games, if it's harder to find, you'll find ones on eBay that are just super expensive. If you want to buy a physical copy of the game, it's incredibly expensive. There's games that are hundreds and hundreds of dollars depending on how rare they are. Well, man, I don't want to pay that much for a Game Boy game that's honestly might not even be that good. And then there's other games that you won't even be able to play at all, either because maybe they were made in Japan and they weren't localized into English. I'm never going to be able to play that game legitimately. But if I download a ROM and maybe a person did some work to translate the language into English and they did the translation that the publisher didn't do to begin with, well, then I can finally play that game. And honestly, I think that's a pat on the back For me, I have more appreciation for the publisher, and I'll use Fire Emblem as an example here. I've played some of the Japanese Fire Emblem games through emulation, which kind of have done some to open me up to the series, so that now when new Fire Emblem games are released, because of my experience with the old games being really good, I'm more apt to buy that. Now, Fire Emblem is a huge franchise by now in United States of America, but it wasn't always that way. And so things like this are how I think, in my opinion, more people are brought into the audience of a franchise or of a game, or maybe even a publisher, through being able to experience some of these older games this way. So for those three reasons, I think emulation should be legal for games that are at least 15 years old. I don't think that we should do that for games that are less than that. Of course, I know that's sort of a weird line to draw in the sand, but what do you think about that? Is emulation okay? Now, I'm not talking about the legality. I'm saying, do you think it should be acceptable? And let me know what you think about that. Comment on Twitter at cheapcardgamer1, or send me an email, cheapcardgamer@email.com. Follow on Spotify, Cheap Card Gamer, so that you don't miss an episode. Thank you guys for joining me. I hope y'all have a wonderful day.